professional registration workshop, which is very timely, given that many of us, I think, have been to the AphA conference earlier this week, and have probably been through a workshop looking at professional registration. We thought it would be really, really good to go through the process again, and then get some questions and answers. So it'll be about a 15-minute presentation about the process, and then we're going to go into a more open question, so people can field whatever queries they have about the process, and we will try and answer it. So let me introduce myself. My name is Sigal, and I am a principal analyst at Nottingham University Hospital. I'm an improvement analyst. I'm also registered with FedIP already as an advanced practitioner, and I'm a member of the AphA Professional Development Committee. And with me is Jane Johnson, who's going to introduce herself as well.
Hi, yeah, I'm Jane Johnson, and I am an Executive Director for AphA, as well as being on the Professional Development Committee. I too am professionally registered. My day job, I've been in the NHS for 30 years in analytics, but just lately I've been working more on an independent health and care analytics consultancy basis.
Real. So I wanted to just as a first slide to introduce where the professional registration sits within the strategic aims of AphA. So AphA's got, I'm not going to go through all the aims here, but basically professional registration is in the very first strategic aim. So AphA wants to develop analytical capacity and capability in health and care, and ensuring recognition of analytics as a profession with progressive career pathways. The only way to go about achieving that aim is through professional registration, or opening up a route to professional registration. So what is it all about? We are registering professionally through the Federation of Informatics Professionals. This is an umbrella organization that encompasses many informatics professions. So there's IT type, there's library professionals, others, and they're all under this umbrella organization. So it's not a membership body. You don't become a member of FedIP. You're a member of your own professional body, in our case, AphA, and you register via FedIP. So they hold the public register, and they set the generic registration standards that we follow. And I will show you exactly how that works in a second. And just on the right-hand side, this is what the professional registry looks like on the FedIP website. So it's people's names. It says when they were registered, and all the and at what level, and of course what organization. So we have 5 levels of registration, starting from associate practitioner all the way up to leading practitioner, and up the levels is about how much more responsibility, accountability, and professional capability or competence is in the job role of the person who is registering. So our process with AphA to register is we receive applications 4 times a year, in January, April, July, and now in October. So throughout October, we're accepting applications. Then the only exception is associate practitioners and re-accreditations. So people who are already registered and only need to revalidate their accreditation, those are welcome at any time throughout the year. Applications are assessed within the 2 months following the application month. So it's all going on a 3-month basis. And basically, the applications will be assessed by assessors who are members of the Professional Development Committee. Not necessarily. We're trying to now expand the pool of assessors because we realize that if all of you who are here on this call apply within this month, we are going to be very pressed to have all of that assessed in the 2 months. So we are looking for assessors. So the way we work it is you submit your application, and an assessor, the assessor who's assigned to the application, will contact you if they have any questions. So this is not you send it in, we reject it if it's not up to standard. There's a dialogue and a give and take there to make sure that you know that your application goes through. The purpose here is to get your application through, not to reject it, of course. So you can choose to present your evidence in person to the assessor, or not in person, I mean online or whatever, if it is sensitive. So if, for example, the evidence you want to submit in support of your application is sensitive for either organizational reason or because it contains patient-related information that shouldn't be sent outside of your organization, then we are very happy to have you present it without recording anything and just seeing that, yes, you've got the evidence to support your application. Once the application is approved, you will be added to the AphA Professional Registers. That happens very quickly. So, and there is a fee to be paid, an annual fee. I'm sorry, my voice seems to be going. I have been asked to emphasize that it's very important that you must be an AphA member with a current membership when you apply. And you must remain a member for the duration of the registration. So if you register and then you, for some reason, decide you no longer want to be a member, you can't continue being registered without being an AphA member. So what do we need to do? The basis of it is that you need to demonstrate competence against registration standards. The standards basically cover everything that you do professionally as an analyst. So it goes through analytical approaches, critical application of analytics, organization and planning of your work, autonomous practice, how do you work on your own, accountability and responsibility. So how do you stand by your work and how do you make sure that that work is of the highest standard? Collaborative working. So how do you work with others on analytical projects or doing analytical work? Communication. How do you communicate with stakeholders and with other analysts? Code of conduct. We've got an AphA code of conduct, which hopefully you all have read when you became a member. And then there is a section about continuous professional development, which is the learning and training that you undertake in order to keep up to date with the profession and to upskill yourself as necessary for your role. So and all of that needs to be done within the context of health domain knowledge. So it's not just your work as an analyst, it's also your work as a health and care analyst. So what does it look like? Hopefully many of you or most of you would have downloaded the document that Lizzie has circulated the link for, which shows all the standards side by side for the different levels of registration. So what I'm showing here is just the first two on the left to avoid it being too crowded on the slide, for the practitioner and the senior practitioner. And On the right of that would be advanced and leading practitioner. Associate practitioner does not need to fill a full application. It's a much shorter form that basically only asks about continuous professional development and your role as an analyst. So it's a very simple form. So sorry, was there a question?
No.
I think somebody hasn't muted their microphone.
Oh, okay.
If you could
No
all,
worries then.
yeah,
No
could you
worries.
please all mute? Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. So at the very top of that document for each standard would be the generic standard that FedIP has put together. So for example, for analytical approaches, it would be undertake health and care informatics tasks relevant to the specialism, which would be analytics in our case, employing appropriate techniques, methods, and procedures. And then the AphA application of that standard would be, it's related to your ability to perform analysis using recognized techniques with an understanding of the context. And the specific standard then asks you about the process you use, the details of how you consider where to get your data and any data quality issues, and to describe the tools and techniques and how you select those. And just as an example, you can see that going from, for example, from a practitioner to a senior practitioner, the questions become more detailed as to, so if you're asked about what tools do you use as a practitioner, as a senior practitioner, you may be asked, so how do you select those tools? What makes you choose one method over another method? Or how do you address data quality issues? At source. What do you do when you come up with an issue like that? So and it goes on to become more and more a higher level of analytical work as you go. So when you're evidencing the standard in your application, there are three things that need to happen. The first and probably the most important one is the reflective practice. We require 3 pieces of reflective practice, and what those reflective practice pieces do is they basically tell us, the assessors, what is it that you do as an analyst. And those get referenced directly back to the standards. And those of you who've been on the workshop given by Mark and Emma in the conference on Monday would have seen that that actually is not a very complicated process. It's actually quite simple. You just tell us what you do, and that should fit with the standards, because the standards are based around analytical work.
We've got
the
one
second
hand up. We've got one hand up from Ivan.
Yeah, just
Ivan?
a quick question about the
Sure.
document. I didn't receive a link to the document. Can you tell me when I can obtain the document?
I'll get a link and put it in the chat. It's on the AphA website, but I'll make it.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So I guess I forgot to mention, and thanks, Ivan, because you reminded me. The use of that top level document is basically for you to be able to select which level you're going to apply for. What you need to do is you need to make sure that you can meet all the standards that are under the same column. So if you decide, for example, you're going to apply as a senior practitioner, you need to make sure that your application applies to senior practitioner across the board, all the way down through all the standards. So you can't apply, meet standards for advanced practitioner in one standard and practitioner in another. It's got to be consistent, and it's got to be at one level. The second thing you need to provide is a portfolio of evidence. Now this basically slots right into your reflective practice. So if you say, for example, that you used an SPC to do your analysis, and you needed to then go to a course to learn how to do SPC, for example, then the sort of evidence that we would look for is something like registration at the training, or an example of a chart you produced, or even the final piece of analysis that includes your SPC chart. So basically almost everything that you put on your application and in your reflective practice needs to be evidenced as much as possible. So we need to be able to say, yeah, I can see that this person says they've done that, and I can see they've done that. And this is where the sensitive information issue comes in, that the portfolio of evidence has to be submitted. If you reckon it's too sensitive to leave the organization, we can arrange for a private viewing, so to speak, where you can present your data without having to submit it. Another option is if there is already a registered practitioner in your organization, they can sign off your evidence. So they can sign at the end of the application form, there is a form that says, I have looked at the applicant's body of evidence, the portfolio, and I agree that this is their work, that it is all in order, and that it covers what they say it does in the application. In which case, we as assessors have a much easier job, because that's already been taken care of, and I can read through the reflective practice and say, yeah, I know this has already been approved and going forward. And the last thing there is the application form. All of these things work together. So I'm next going to look at the reflective practice, because this really is at the core of the application. This is an example of what reflective practice might look like. This is an example that's available on the AphA website. So if you go to the registration page of the website, you can download all of these, this example, and I think maybe a few more. And you can see that people say, for example, this is using STAR. So it's using the situation, tasks, actions you took to fulfill those tasks, and then the results of the analysis. Or the task or the project. So, for example, you might say, my line manager asked me to do X. This is the context for it. You put a little thing that tells me this refers to standard number 1.1. In this case, this is practitioner level. And so on and so forth. So each one, every time you tell me, this is what I've done, this is what it refers to, what standard it refers to. And the last thing here is, you can see in the blue, in this case, this is the evidence they provided to tell me, yes, this is it. I can go and look at the SQL script and say, yeah, I can see this person has written SQL. They're proficient in that. This is good evidence.
Can I just add as well that you'll all notice in there, in those bullets, not every bullet necessarily has a standard against it, and not every standard necessarily, it might not necessarily have a piece of evidence. You're using this to write out your reflective practice, so you need all those bullets to keep in line of what you're doing. But don't worry, like in the situation there, you can see the second bullet hasn't got a standard next to it. Doesn't matter, it's all part of the story you're telling.
Yes.
As long as you cover them all eventually.
Yes. Yeah, and ideally when you write this, and if you look, then there is a checklist, I'll show it to you in a second. If you look at the checklist and you say, I haven't covered all the standards, this is what you'd use your second and third reflective practices to basically highlight those standards that you haven't captured in the first. But we find that usually your first reflective practice generally would be covering up to 70% of the standards, because that's the way you know, it just works out, because most of these standards are about analytical work rather than some more. So things like CPD may not be covered, or may. You know, things like code of conduct won't, maybe. So this is where you'd use your second and third reflective practice pieces to cover those other standards that you've missed in the first. Just telling us the story of your reflective practice is not enough without the actual reflective part. And this is what the second page of each of those reflective practices is. So what we ask you to do is then go and tell us what you thought was the result for you as an analyst. So what went well with what you did? What went less well? What did you learn, and what would you do differently if you did it next time? And this shows us that you're really able to learn from what you've done and progress to the next level with every piece. Right, so application form and the evidence portfolio. This is what the first sort of standard page would look like. And you can see that on the left-hand side, you've got those standards that are on the big sheet with all the different levels. That's just all of those levels. Next to them is a commentary box. Now, this commentary, you're not repeating what you've already written in the reflective practice. If you think your reflective practice answers the standard, all you need to say in this case is, this is covered in reflective practice so and so. You put what reflective practice is in this box, and whatever evidence you provided with the reflective practice, or any additional evidence you want to provide here. The commentary here should not exceed, ballpark, 200 words. So we're not looking for huge, long expositions. Almost everything should be covered in your reflective practice. And this should be only used heavily for those standards that are more difficult to evidence in a reflective practice. Okay. And as you go through the application form, you'd basically be, so down this side are all the standards, and you have a checklist. So you've got reflective practice, 1, 2, 3, 4 if you've got one. You don't need 4. We only ask for 3, but you can submit more if you want. And the evidence provided. And basically what this helps you do is make sure that by the end, so when you've finished your application form and your reflective practices, and you've joined the two, as I've shown, every bit of this should be covered. So every standard should either have evidence or reflective practice evidence, or both. Okay. So basically, once you've done that, you've described your journey as an analyst through the standards. It goes from the very lowest level. I wouldn't say, you know, it's not the least important, but it goes from your individual analytical approaches that you apply to single pieces of work, all the way to how you work with others and how you plan your career going forward. So there is a whole journey in one application, one document. And we really hope that you will join that journey and join us on that journey. And I think we will open this for questions now.
Can I just add a couple more comments then?
Of course.
So this is, your skills and your job role are quite closely connected, but then you find very often that somebody that's doing a job in a provider organisation might be a band lower than somebody doing the same job in a commissioning organisation or NHSE or something like that. So it's your skills. You might not be covering all of it in your job at the moment. So this is what your skill level is. As long as you can evidence that you have recently done some of those skills, then, you know, that's the level you go for. After assessment, yes, we do. It does actually go through the Professional Development Committee. So we get one of us will assess a piece of work, and once we come up with our conclusion, we will take it back to the Professional Development Committee and share with them and say, this is our reasoning, this is our understanding, this is why we've, you know, agreed to admit them on the register. So it's not down to one person. The whole committee makes that. The registration is for 3 years. So when you do it, you don't have to do it every year. You've got 3 years. The associate practitioner, which is the very entry level one that Sigal mentioned, only you need something like 250 words to describe what your job is and how you are doing analysis. It's for people new into the profession. And then you pledge to do your professional registration within a 2-year period. So by that time, you know, hopefully you will have enough evidence and skills to be able to do the registered practitioner level. For communications evidence, sometimes it might be meeting minutes or it might be an email trail, anything that you know that can help there. And it's through when we say that we have, how else, I'll go back to you in a minute, Joanne. So when we say that, as Sigal mentioned, if you have a registered practitioner in your organisation and it's sensitive information and you can't send it, they can sign it off. And that's kind of covered by the code of conduct that we sign up to through our professional registration. So we can do that. So how old can your evidence be? We like it to be sort of a year, a couple of years maybe. We do realise that we have people that have maybe moved on to a different organisation, and their reflective practice is a piece of work that they did recently for another organisation. So if you can't get hold of the evidence, if you haven't managed to save some yourself, that's where we could maybe find out if there's another registered professional there, or we can have meetings with you. You talk to us in those instances. But some of the higher level things, if you go for the leadership, the leading practitioner, you know, and you're involved in strategy, you might only do a strategy once every 3 years. So things like that, obviously, we understand are going to be a little bit older, but your analytical work, we would expect it to be, you know, within the last year, preferably. Currently a student member, currently works as an analyst to the NHS. Can I apply for a you can apply for any level if your skills, if you have the skills and you have the evidence to put in that application. So if you are in as a student but you want to apply as a practitioner, yes, if you can evidence, then that's absolutely fine. Code of conduct, yep, Andrew's posted it there. And okay, I see, off to another meeting. Yeah, it's being recorded. So I'll move on now. Any other questions? Oh, and also don't forget that the examples of reflective practice are also on the website. I'll put the link in there as well, so you can go through and have a look at that.
Thanks, Jane, really helpful.
Any more questions? Bertha.
Just one question. So this session has been very helpful because it helps me to understand, and I attended the AphA event on Monday. Are you going to set up one-to-one sessions just before the end of October? Because I believe at the end of October, the applications session is going to be closed, isn't it? Are you going to set up one-to-one sessions that we can, you know, my form could be peer reviewed by someone before I submit it?
We don't do one-to-one sessions simply because the quantity, you know, the time it would take us to have to do one-to-ones and go through the marking and everything. Your branches, your branch leads, if you ask them to put on workshops for helping with professional registration, they can put things in there. But as Sigal said right at the beginning, you know, if you've done this and you've ticked off the boxes and you've done your practice and you've put in the evidence, then submit. And over those 2 months, when we're going through it, I would say 80% of the applications we get just go straight through. They pass. They've got the evidence, the reflective practices up and together. But occasionally, we might just want one little bit of information. And that's where we would go back to you and say, brilliant application, but there's just one standard. Can you just talk this through with me? Or can you just send me a copy of that chart or whatever? And so it's not, you don't have to do it all again. We will talk through with that person. So that's really your one-to-one that will come just for those 1 or 2 standards that maybe haven't quite evidenced enough for us.
Plus, there is going to be another workshop later on in the month, again, open to everyone, which is exactly for those sort of questions where you can raise any last minute things that you're not sure of in your application, get some feedback on that. So it won't be a one-to-one, but it will definitely be a platform for you to, if you're still unsure about one or more of the standards, to go and ask any questions you need. Yeah.
Right. If we go to we'll go to Julia now, and then I'll go back to the chat.
Hi, thank you. I'm sorry, I just missed the last bit. Have you finished your session, Jane and Sigal? You have finished the session, have you? Or is there more to? Is there more to
today?
Come? Yes, today.
No, I think we're still. It's an hour session. Yeah,
okay. I just wanted to mention to everyone on the call, I know some of you know me, that's on the call. So being a member of AphA and also getting your professional registration. So I work for NHS England in the primary care group, and we've just had an email around from the Statistical Government Department, and the National Statistician, I don't know if many of you have seen this, Sir Ian Diamond has commissioned a collaborative review into health analysis, and there's a survey that we need to fill in, and that's because the Health Statistics Leadership Forum wants us to be collaborative, and there is lots of overlap in analysis. But the point is, in that survey that's been sent out to most NHS England staff, they actually ask you if you're a member of AphA, which is really fantastic. And also NHS England are producing a skills framework, and I know that AphA has fed into that. So I'm doing a bit of marketing for Sigal and Jane, but just to say I haven't yet got my professional registration, but I am on the case. I've been on the case for a few years, but very busy. But just to say, it will be very important with the Ben Goldacre review as well, to have that registration and to say that you're a member of FEDIP. That will definitely help with your career. So thank you for that, Jane and Sigal.
Thank you very much.
Andrew, could you speak just maybe briefly about the National Competency Framework, because it does very much you know, align with those standards that we're looking at.
Yeah, so happy to come in. So great to see so many people here, and thank you, Jane and Sigal, for doing this. So I'm also on the Professional Development Committee, and great if you were at the AphA conference to hear about the launch of the National Competency Framework. So I think there's a very nice Venn diagram that the National Competency team have, which puts competencies at the centre, but then it puts professional registration around it. It puts having a development framework around it. So all of these initiatives are designed to be complementary. So you can approach professional registration, you can look at the National Competency Framework for data professionals that's out. You can look at them separately because maybe you want to do things in chunks, but they are absolutely designed to complement each other. So you've seen the kind of prompts that we use for our standards, but we don't try and go beyond the detail into the whole range of analytical techniques, do we? Because there's so many of those. That's where the National Competency Framework then comes in to expand on what do we mean by health analytics, what are the specialisms, the domains, etc. So very much complementary, and it's great that there was a deliberate choice by the National Competency Framework to use the levels as we use the levels as well. So there's an absolute consistency and flow through there. So they're absolutely designed to be complementary, aren't they? And if you're working through the where do you sit on the National Competency Framework, that's going to give you some great evidence. That's going to help you design some of the reflective practice pieces, isn't it? So definitely complementary, but you can pursue this now as well if you're maybe looking at the National Competency Framework. So.
And the National Competency Framework team are actually going to be visiting all 42 systems. So though they did the launch on Monday at the AphA conference, they will be going to each region to go through that competency framework with each region. If I just go back to the chats, I'll go back up a bit.
Yes, there's a question here about.
Well, I was going to go to the.
Have
to
you
the
had
top
many?
of the chats there. So have you had many people come through registration from non-NHS backgrounds? We do have membership from public health, local authorities and social care. I can't say off the top of my head though if any of them have come through registration. I don't know if.
No, I don't think we have, but we'd love it, wouldn't we? Because
yeah, we would.
AphA is designed to be health and care, so there's absolutely no reason why not, because you will be able to tell the story of where you work in health and care, and then if you've got the relevant evidence, etc., which it would be entirely possible, we would definitely love to see that, wouldn't we?
Yeah. And then about contacting for advice about suitability of a piece of evidence, it would be worth talking to your branch leads or yes, the branch leads, because they hold the regular workshops. I mean, if you've got emails, if you know of other people that are registered, you could always talk to them as well. And Andrew has in fact put on the link for the registration workshop on the 24th of this month, if you want to go in again and have another go, because maybe by the 24th you might have done all your application and you just want to ask a few final questions on the 24th. Looking at the leading practitioner standards, they're mostly blank. Yeah, it is just a variety of approaches. There's some of them where there might be a little bit more required at a higher level, or sometimes the higher level, their first question might be so complex that all the other little bits don't apply that might apply in the other one. So there's nothing missing. It is just purely because of the variety and the different levels and the complexity of what each standard question asks. If anyone else wants to jump in there, if we submit an application, does it need to be complete to submit? No, it has to be complete and finalised and submitted by the end of October. We are moving to an online thing. FedIP have got a platform built for online applications. It's not there yet. Once that happens, it will be easier to do because you will be able to go in and build it and stick in your evidence and keep going back and building on it until you hit that submit button. But at the moment, we don't. Whenever the submit has to be done once it's absolutely complete. If every standard is covered in reflective practice, how does it work with the commentary in the application form? So maybe reflective practice might not necessarily cover something like code of conduct. You might not be able to work that into a reflective practice, but it might be that in the code, when you get to that bit of the application, say, you've done your equality and diversity training, or examples of where you've had to I can't think of one off the top of my head, but it might be something like that, that you wouldn't necessarily work into a reflective practice, but you've definitely covered it in some way, that you can go in and put it in there. So that's why we allow, you know, up to a couple of 100 words for the standards in there, because not everything, some things might be more difficult to put into a reflective practice, and we don't want you to just squeeze it in there somehow, some way. Just be more clear about it in that part of the standard, but most of it will be covered.
The fact that you're allowed 200 words doesn't mean you have to use the 200 words.
No.
It could be that you just say, this is evidence in my reflective practice. And if your reflective practice does indeed reflect it and is signposted to the standard, that's not a problem at all. So don't feel like you have to fill those boxes in with a lot of words.
So it's 3 months enough evidence? Do I have to wait longer? It's not the... No, so, you know, if you did a whole project last week that covers, you know, all the communications and the methodologies and the tools used and the visualizations and the collaborations, and you've had meetings and, you know, spoken to the people about it, it doesn't have to... You can use that evidence. It's not... We're not asking you to gather evidence. We're just saying, put in a reflector. I don't know, maybe I've misunderstood it, but we're just saying, look, if you've done a project, use that as your, or a big bit of analysis. If you've been asked to look at winter pressures, do a bit of forecasting, do a bit of demand and capacity modelling, you know, figure out how it affects through A&E or whatever, the throughputs and the flows that you might have been doing over the last month anyway, as, you know, part of your work, then you could write reflective practice on that and cover a whole load of the bits and pieces. And then you might think, but back in the summer I did something, or you know, there might have been COVID work or something you were doing. So I'm not sure. I don't know if I've, you know, totally, I might have misunderstood, but yeah, just you don't have to wait until you've done 3 months of work. You might have done it all in a month, as long as you can evidence.
Yeah, I want to add that it doesn't have to necessarily be a piece of analytical work. You could say, for example, give an example where you've, I don't know, put together a workshop about something to do with your job, whether it's a little tutorial about analytics or something like that, is also something that you might want to present as evidence, because it could hit a lot of the standards that actually are harder perhaps to capture, like how do you work with stakeholders and how do you ensure that they understand what you've done, things like that. So don't feel that you have to be only limited to analytical pieces of work per se, as in a project that's got charts and whatever. It could be anything to do with your day-to-day work that is based in analytics. And I think that might be helpful in understanding that, 3 months could be enough. If, for example, you've led a workshop or gave a tutorial or something like that during those 3 months, that can be one piece of reflective practice on how did you do it, what did you do, you know, using exactly the same methodology as a project.
There's another question there. Is there a rough correspondence between band and practitioner level? So actually that all comes back to the competency framework, which is built up at bands that kind of do move over, you know, do match to the same two levels in the professional registration. I don't know if you want to add more on that, Andrew.
So I think we and the National Competency Framework know this is quite tricky because different organisations just have slightly different bandings of jobs, don't they? And so it's hard to be prescriptive about it. It is more about matching. There is a diagram somewhere in the National Competency Framework that use as a rough kind of lining up. So if you were going to be an advanced, you'd probably be 8A, B, C. So leading practitioner above that. To be the senior, probably a band 6 or 7. To be a practitioner, probably 4 or 5, something like that. But there is this caveat that just we know that NHS organisations just can have varying kind of job descriptions, can't they, and grades, which is part of what the National Competency Framework comes in. But I think it's something of that kind of order. So pitch it at that, and then have a look at the different standards and see how you fit. And we can kind of advise on that as well.
It's about the level you work at rather than your banding level, because people can work above their band level. So they're competent in terms of their competence, they can be above, where they're banded. So I think it's really hard to match the bandings, but yeah.
Right.
Well, related.
Who should you have as your sponsor? Is it better if they're an AphA member, or even more preferable, registered? How much time would they be expected to allow to support you in an application? Just going back to the applications, I found that when I did mine, I started about 3 times and went off and did something else and lost track, and I had to keep restarting. If you took a day, 1 day of a weekend, 1 day's annual leave, and just plow through it, you should get it done in a day. But my advice is don't keep starting and stopping, and because you lose the flow and you lose track and you think, did I evidence that bit or didn't I? And then you end up having to go back and read all your reflective practices you've already written, keep it in your mind and keep going. If it's that you might not necessarily have somebody, I think it's not necessarily preferable if they're an AphA member or registered. If they're registered, it makes it a lot easier for signing off the evidence. But not all organisations that they can go to. It's somebody that has to be able to say what they've written in this application. So it might be your line manager, who might not be a member, who might not be registered, but they have to be able to say, yes, everything that this person has written is, I agree, this is them, this is their job, this is what they do. Anything to add there, Sigal or Andrew?
No, perfect. Yeah.
So they don't need a lot of time to support the application. They just need to, glance through the reflective practices. They're not going to be worried about, have you evidenced this and have you evidenced that? They just want to read it and say, yeah, that's right, they did that.
But in terms of, will your kind of line managers or sponsors, or heads of department start giving the time for this? Well, hopefully that's where the general move, and the conference on Monday was fantastic for that, for giving a real prominence to the overall kind of package of things which are about professionalization. So the AphA registration, the National Competency Framework, developing the requirement to do continuous professional development in some way. So hopefully, if there's a general move and support for that across organizations, that would play out, that leaders within your organization, your line manager, would be welcoming that you're doing this, and therefore would give you some time to do this in a work setting as well. That's where we want to get to as part of this. It is partly about your own development, so it's fair enough that you would put some of your own time in, but we also want to create that environment, don't we, where organizations take all of these different elements seriously and do start giving you time to do this because they see the value of it.
They do, because for finance people, they will give them time out. They'll give them study days to go off and do whatever they need to get their registrations up and together. So that's, as Andrew says, we're hoping through the competency framework and the weight of NHSE behind us on this, that they can, they will start to allow that kind of time out for people.
Yeah. New question: are the registrations public record? Yes, they are. They are. I think Andrew put at the top of the chat somewhere.
Yeah, just put it in again.
There is a link to the public register.
So you can check that we're not we're not making it up. We are on there, aren't we? People can go and find us.
We are on there. Yes. Yes. Oh, thank you. That's it again. Yeah. Are there any more questions?
Would it be good to get a show of hands? Is anybody in the process of kind of doing your application, and maybe you might be pushing it over and get it done for the end of this month? It'd be great if we've maybe not yet.
Oh,
Okay, excellent.
yay.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We want to see those numbers just creeping up, don't we? And then exponential growth after that. Fantastic.
Linda, yep, great.
And I think, just building on what you were saying, Jane, about the process of doing it, I think if people can think of what their reflective practices might be, so you begin to just kind of plot out what some of those might be, the challenge can be just making sure you've got all your evidence. And so as soon as you think of those topics, you can just begin to get that, can't you? So because you're not having to scrabble back for, did I get that course certificate or that minute or that presentation? You just start gathering that. If you've got that, the actual writing of it, as you say, Jane, can then be, it's a reasonably quick process. It's like gathering of stuff and deciding what you're going to choose in the first place, isn't it?
I mean, for those of you that were on Monday's conference and went to the workshop with Emma and Mark, they went through, they said, right, stick up a hand. Has anybody got a project? So someone's hand went up, they described a piece of work, and as they were describing it, Emma was filling in a reflective practice template, and people around the room were going through the things and shouting, oh, that's a 2.1, that's a 3.7, or whatever. And within the hour, I mean, okay, there's lots of people in the room, but within the hour, that's a reflective practice, you know, more or less done. And then it was just the second page that had to be done. So it's, you know, it is really, really quite doable. A reaccreditation application I haven't done one yet, so I don't know. I don't believe it's that onerous. It's nothing like
it's very,
length.
very light. If you're doing it at the same level.
If it's
so
the
if you're
same
doing
level.
it at the same level, which is what I did, then because you've already given that evidence, so you're describing more around what have you done around continuing professional development and continuing to abide by the code of conduct and stuff. If you're wanting to go to a different level, obviously you'd be applying for a different set of standards, and that would be a new application. So that depends. So I chose to go for the same level, which made it a pretty quick process to do.
Yeah, I did a different level, and then you have to do the full application, unfortunately. So, yeah. There's another question about if you can't get the application done by month end, you have to wait until January. And I think the answer to that is yes. We will accept applications until the end of October. And then the next window opens in January. And this is to make sure that we can do the assessments in the 2-month window that follows, so the assessors can apportion time to go through those applications, and they go through the whole process. Anything else? Okay. Please feel free to contact me if you do need to ask some other questions. I'll put my my email in the link in the chat. In case anybody's got any questions after the end of this.
So Linda's asked if the recording will be publicly available. Lizzie, you're on the call, you're doing the recording. I'm assuming it would just go into the members area of AphA?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll upload it into the members area.
If I join as an associate this month and then complete the next level in 3 months, do I pay 1 or 2 registration fees? Oh, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Never had anyone that keen.
Wow.
if you can do the next level in 3 months' time, I would suggest wait for 3 months' time and just do that level then.
Yeah, don't do an associate right now.
No. So, well, the associate, which is the one where you just do the 250 words and pledge to do it within 2 years, that one doesn't go on the FedIP register. The associate is really just your pledge, your commitment to doing professional registration. So you don't pay at an associate level. You pledge to do a level within 2 years. If you do that first professional registration level 3 months down the line as a registered practitioner or whatever, then that's when you pay your £25 and that's when you go on the FedIP register. So associate level is just really a pledge thing. It's not a full public registration level because it's only 250 words and doesn't ask for evidence. It's really just, this is what I do and this is how I'm going to progress my career and I want to be professionally registered. So there is no payment for that level.
Right. So we hope to see more and more applications come through. And please do attend the workshop at the later on in the month if you are already started and just have a little bit left to complete your application. Try and get it in.
Oh, hold on. Richard's saying I was invited to pay FedIP fee at associate practitioner level. I'd need to go back to Emma on that one. I'm not quite sure. But if you've paid it, yeah, I think you shouldn't be liable until you're actually a registered practitioner. Associate practitioner isn't a registered. We'll check that one out for you, Richard.
We will do. Yeah. I just don't do it. Wow. Okay.
Okay.
The register, has associates on it.
It does.
Right.
So I think we need to check that because the associates is a relatively new development that came in over the year, isn't it? So I think we need to check that because they are on there. So we need to go back and check that one.
Okay.
We are out of date.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for putting us right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for attending. And we really do hope to see many more of you on the register in the coming months. That's it, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, 2 o'clock.